According to Gallup, 71% of Americans support minimum wage increases provided that they don't lead to job loss. So it's a highly popular issue, and I understand why it is. It's a value that most of us share. We want to see people have good lives. I understand that value, but at the same time, I want to share a story with you of some effects that that's had recently. I went over to a local restaurant, so I got their story from them. Unfortunately, they were worried about the repercussions of sharing that on camera. They thought it might hurt their restaurant, and their margins are low enough as it is, so they didn't want to take that risk. So I'll just tell you their story. I talked to the owner, and she told me that with this first minimum wage increase, that we're having a staggered minimum wage increase in Minnesota. So last August, we went up to $8 an hour, and before they even got there, they were having a meeting to figure out how to cope with this. They were talking about going to cheaper bread. The owner herself was going to have to pick up tables, and this is just a greasy spoon, that's a burger joint basically. They had never had to do layoffs before, but they had to lay off their most recent hire, and that woman was so desperate for work that she offered to stay and work for nothing, just work for tips, and legally they couldn't do that. So they simply couldn't employ her any longer. And I also spoke with one of their servers. This woman is a single mom. This is her main form of livelihood. She's worked there for several years, and because they can no longer pay her for 5 days a week anymore, they can't afford to. They have cut her shifts down to 3 days a week, and the owner herself is picking up a lot of those shifts. But this woman now, because she's making fewer tips by only working, even though she makes more on an hourly basis, the 3 days a week is far fewer tips, and so she's having trouble making her mortgage. So that's what happens when the rubber hits the road. Minimum wage increases always lead to job loss. The General Accounting Office estimated that if President Obama got his way with a minimum wage increase to $10.10 an hour, that 500,000 people would lose their jobs. But we actually have an example recently, and some UC San Diego researchers broke apart the data, and what they found is that our most recent federal minimum wage increase to $7 an hour, 1.4 million Americans lost their jobs. So needless to say, if we went all the way up to 10.10, we'd probably be looking at far more than 500,000 lost jobs. But there's one industry that benefits from minimum wage increases, and I'm about to bring an engineer on to talk about that.
Hi.
Peter's an engineer, and I want to get his take on minimum wage increases.
Well, as labor costs increase, production costs also increase, and we need to find ways to save money. And that generally turns into finding ways to streamline production lines or automate processes, which means we don't have to hire more people, or we can get more work done without adding more people to a line. Or sometimes we can get rid of people even if we no longer need as many people to make the same amount of product.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, it's actually good for your line of work because they replace people with machines.
Right.
And somebody has to make those machines.
And it's cheaper to hire one engineer if one engineer can keep 10 extra people off the production line.
Yeah. So it benefits people who, I'm sure a lot of engineers work for minimum wage, right?
Oh yes, all of us work for minimum wage.
Yeah. So basically, the people it benefits are not minimum wage workers.
No.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So the trouble with minimum wage increases is that they often make the poor get poorer, as in the case of the woman who lost her job at the restaurant. It can also make the rich get richer, as in the case of automation engineering, because it suddenly becomes cost effective as labor prices go up to automate those processes and make machines to do the very same things that humans used to do. It's also simply bad policy. I think we can all see that the cost of living in San Francisco is not the same as it is in Arthur, Iowa, right? So if we know that, why would we set the same wage in San Francisco as it is in the middle of Iowa? But it's also a freedom issue. If, for instance, I have a dream, say I want to work at a TV station and I'm willing to sacrifice, I'm willing to work for $5 an hour to get my foot in the door, to get the experience that I want for my future. That should be my choice. But with minimum wage laws, everything now from zero, because keep in mind, working for nothing is always legal. Volunteering is okay. But now everything from zero to minimum wage, I'm no longer free to contract my wages at that rate. Further, there might be some fringe benefits that I want. Say I want to work at an alternative health clinic for the benefits that I get by working there. Maybe I get free medical care and I need it. I am willing, in that case, to work for, say, $4 an hour. Maybe my expenses aren't that much, but I really want those fringe benefits. But now I am no longer free to do that, and now that clinic has to think seriously about whether they can actually afford to hire another employee at that minimum wage of, right now here in Minnesota, it's $8 an hour. America used to be the land of opportunity, but now we have an opportunity problem. Minimum wage laws have unintended consequences of reducing opportunities for really, most often, the people at the bottom of the totem pole, not the people who already are established. They're not making minimum wage. This policy doesn't even affect me, and I'm not an entrepreneur, so I'm not paying someone minimum wage either. But I don't like to see the people that it does hurt. I don't like knowing that a woman right over here was begging to work for free because she needed the job so bad. That's a problem. So let's look at the real consequences. When the rubber hits the road, even though we may feel good about certain policies, we need to see who it might be hurting before we implement those things. If minimum wage law increases really work, why not have $50 an hour? You know, what's the holdup? Why don't we just, the sky's the limit, right? But I think we all know that that's not feasible. So we really need to look at the consequences of those policies so that we can make this the land of opportunity once again. Thanks for watching.